Our word for the week is community. All right? So, I want to ask you a question, and I want to propose to you an idea, and then I'm going to tell you how I got there. All right? Here's the question. When you say we, who do you mean? When you say we, who do you mean? Give you a second to think.
People like me.
I love Tori so much. So that was a question. When you say we, who do you mean? I'm going to ask you that again. That's where we're going to end today. My proposal that I want to put forward to you, submit to you, is that you and I are caught up in an ever-expanding ring of inclusion and empowerment called the gospel. I'm going to say it again. You and I are caught up in an ever-expanding ring of inclusion and empowerment called the gospel. Okay? Now let me tell you how I got there. In the framing story for the Judeo-Christian faith found back in Genesis, chapters 1 and 2, you have an epic or a metaphorical telling of this mystical, mythical origin of all things. All right? And built into that ancient community was trying to answer some questions. One of the questions they were trying to answer, and this is the way that epic tales work, one of the things they were trying to answer is, what's wrong with us? Why so much violence? Why the hatred? Why the division? Why the struggle? What's wrong? So it's important that if we have an origin story, it's important that we understand something very central to that origin story, and that we don't have a built-in virus into the program that gives us our origin, right? That's our operating system. And so in that story, if you take the time to read it, there is a breaking. A breaking of the circle, okay? Or what I'm going to call a tearing of the fabric that holds us all together. All right? A tearing of the fabric that holds us all together. Well, the unfortunate thing is that we, as Western, often Gentile Christians, have inherited not a Jewish understanding of this story, but one that has been filtered through Greek philosophy. And so we got this idea that is not in the story, it's nowhere in the Bible, called the fall. Raise your hand if you've heard of the fall. Yeah, it's very popular. But I just want to point out, it's not in the story. There's no fall. Where we get the language of fall from Greek philosophy is from the perfect form down to the compromised reality. And so when we explain this as a fall, we've come down, descended into violence, as Marjorie Suhaki would say. And then the goal is to try through belief often to get back up to an elevated state. Well, here's the problem. That's like trying to play a game where there are no actual rules, right? The game doesn't exist, so you'd never really know if you won. There is no fall, and so you don't ever get unfallen. The better understanding of what happened in that epic tale in the garden is that the fabric that held all things together was torn, or the circle was broken, is another way of talking about that. So what you see is in 3 layers. You see that Adam and Eve were separated from God. He said, "Where are you?" He was searching for them. That they were then separated from each other. Adam says, "She made me do it." Right? They broken human to human. And then they were also separated from the earth. And that which used to so effortlessly give them life and sustain them and nourish them would now require exhausting work, the sweat of your brow, to bring forth fruit from the dust. So you have a tearing at three levels. They're now separated from God, they're separated from each other, and they're separated from the earth that gives them life. That's a much more Jewish understanding. It's relational, not status, right? Not essential in the fall. It's relational. Why am I talking about this today? Well, a lot of people are asking the question these days, who is my neighbor? And what we're figuring out is that it turns out I have a lot more neighbors than I knew. A lot more people are my neighbors than I ever thought of before. In fact, all around the world we're now connected through a global web of media and internet and so many other things. Our economies are tied together. So it turns out that somebody on the other side of the world who looks very different than me, who speaks a different language than me, turns out we're connected in this big web of life, this web of meaning. Who's my neighbor turns out to be a much bigger question than anybody knew. If you just thought, well, 3 doors down, is that my neighbor? 7 doors down, is that my neighbor? Person in the neighborhood across the highway, is that my neighbor? Well, no, they're in a different neighborhood. It turns out we're all in this together. The fabric that holds us together is being strained and stressed and is tearing. The circle is broken. So I want to propose to you that this is not a result of some essential or primal fall and that we're just fallen people. I want to propose to you that our story is essentially relational, and we're relational beings. So to go back to my original question, when you say we, who do you mean? My prayer for you is that during this time of both social isolation and societal unrest, that these two things, which seem very different from each other, actually dovetail somehow in your heart and spirit, where you begin to answer the question, when I say we, who do I mean? My hope is that you start to mean more and more people, and that your circle of who you're aware of, who you care about, who you will sacrifice for, who you will advocate on the behalf of, who you will stand up for, who you want to listen to, is an ever-expanding ring of inclusion and empowerment that we are going to call the good news of God's love. So my hope is that whether you are straight or gay, single, married, divorced, black or white, educated or not highly educated, whether you make a lot of money or don't make a lot of money, whether you are overweight or whatever that other thing is, I don't even know the vocabulary word. Whatever it is, whatever body shape you have, whatever age you are, when you say we, that you mean more and more people than you used to. Because we're all in this together. And the fabric that holds us together is tearing. The circle that connects us all is broken. And one of the realizations that we have the ability to come to in this moment is that when there is stress on one side of the trampoline, that stress gets passed through the fabric and is absorbed by the structures, the springs on the other side of the trampoline. None of us are an island. We're all in this together. So when I say we, I mean all of us. That's my prayer, is that your imagination is an ever-expanding ring of inclusion and empowerment that we're going to call the good news of God's love. That's community. And it's not defined by neighborhood or street address. It's not defined by any of those things that our city planners give us or anything that our banks designed or our school systems. Our loyalty is to we, all of us together. Amen?
Amen. Amen.
I am going to, oh, thanks. I practiced. I am going to ask Joy to play us a song that I picked out to give us a moment to think, to breathe, and then I want to talk about this for a minute.